Lesson 63. Run. When we're in a hurry, what must we do?
When we're in a hurry, we must run.
What's the farthest you've ever run?
The farthest I've ever run is 1 mile.
Past progressive, continuous. I was speaking. We use the present progressive for a continuous action that we are doing now. For example, I am speaking English now. We use the past progressive for a continuous action that we were doing in the past. For example, I was speaking English yesterday. This tense is often followed by the words whilst or when. When do we use the present progressive? And give me an example, please.
We use the present progressive for a continuous action that we are doing now. For example, I am speaking English now.
When do we use the past progressive? And give me an example, please.
We use the past progressive for a continuous action that we were doing in the past. For example, I was speaking English yesterday.
The three uses of the past progressive. At the same time. 1. We use the past progressive when there are two actions in the past, both in progress at the same time. For example, I was watching TV yesterday whilst my brother was reading a book. In this sentence, both verbs are in the past progressive. 2. We also use it for two actions in the past, where the second action happens whilst the first one is in progress. For example, I was watching TV yesterday when my brother entered the room. In this sentence, the first verb is in the past progressive, whilst the second one is in the past simple. 3. A third use is when it is not followed by another verb. For example, we were speaking English during the last lesson. What are the three uses of the past progressive? And give me an example of each, please.
The three uses of the past progressive are 1. When there are two actions in the past, both in progress at the same time. For example, I was watching television yesterday, whilst my brother was reading a book. 2. Where the second action happens whilst the first one is in progress. For example, I was watching television when my brother entered the room. 3. When it is not followed by another verb. For example, we were speaking English during the last lesson.
Was it raining whilst you were coming to school today?
Yes, it was raining whilst I was coming to school today. Or, no, it wasn't raining whilst I was coming to school today.
Were you speaking to anybody yesterday whilst you were having your lunch?
Yes, I was speaking to somebody yesterday whilst I was having my lunch. Or, no, I wasn't speaking to anybody yesterday whilst I was having my lunch.
What were you doing when I came into the room at the beginning of the lesson?
I was speaking to my friend when you came into the room at the beginning of the lesson.
Were the pupils standing or sitting when I left the classroom at the end of the last lesson?
The pupils were sitting when you left the classroom at the end of the last lesson.
Were we living 1,000 years ago?
No, we weren't living 1,000 years ago.
What were you doing at this time last Sunday?
I was taking a walk at this time last Sunday.
As you can see, after whilst we use the past progressive. Whilst you were coming, whilst you were having, etc. But after when, we use the past simple. When I came, when I left, etc. Active and passive voice. Subject, object. Active. George. John pushes George. Passive. John is pushed by George. We have the sentence, John pushes George. In this sentence, John is the subject and George is the object. And, because the subject does the action, the verb is said to be in the active voice. In the sentence, John is pushed by George, John is still the subject and George is still the object, but because the subject does not do the action, but receives it, the verb is said to be in the passive voice. We form the passive voice by using the verb to be and a past participle, and usually follow it with the word by. Another example is active voice. The teacher speaks to the pupil. Passive voice. The teacher is spoken to by the pupil. In the first sentence, the teacher is the subject and does the action, whilst in the second sentence, the teacher is still the subject, but this time he receives the action, which puts the verb into the passive voice. A further example is active voice. The teacher pushes the table. Passive voice. The table is pushed by the teacher. In the first sentence, the teacher is the subject and does the action, and the table is the object, which receives the action, whilst in the second sentence, the table becomes the subject, but, because it does not do the action but receives it, the verb is in the passive voice. Other examples are, I pull you, you are pulled by me. We sell bread, bread is sold by us. They build houses, houses are built by them. The passive voice can be used with different tenses. For example, present simple, I pull you, you are pulled by me. Present progressive, I am pulling you, you are being pulled by me. Past simple, I pulled you, you were pulled by me. Future, I shall pull you, you will be pulled by me. Present perfect, I have pulled you, you have been pulled by me. Conditional, I should pull you, you would be pulled by me. Subjunctive, if I were to pull you, if you were to be pulled by me. Past progressive, I was pulling you, you were being pulled by me. What do we mean when we say a verb is in the active voice?
When we say a verb is in the active voice, we mean that the action is done by the subject of the verb.
Give me an example, please.
I cut the bread.
What do we mean when we say a verb is in the passive voice?
When we say a verb is in the passive voice, we mean that the action is not done by the subject, but is done to the subject.
How do we form the passive voice?
We form the passive voice by using the verb to be and a past participle, and we usually follow it with the word by.
Give me an example, please.
The bread is cut by me.
I'm going to give you some sentences in the active voice, and I want you to put them into the passive voice. I clean my car every Saturday.
My car is cleaned by me every Saturday.
You are breaking the window.
The window is being broken by you.
She forgot him.
He was forgotten by her.
We shall bore them.
They will be bored by us.
They have turned the picture round.
The picture has been turned round by them.
Would Charles ask the teacher a question?
Would the teacher be asked a question by Charles?
If his uncle were to buy the house, he would be happy.
If the house were to be bought by his uncle, he would be happy.
If I dropped the glass, it'd break.
If the glass were dropped by me, it'd break.
Were the two men driving the cars too fast?
Were the cars being driven too fast by the two men?
Murder. Do you like reading about murders?
Yes, I like reading about murders. Or, no, I don't like reading about murders.
Prison. To make one feel. Would you like to see inside a prison?
Yes, I would like to see inside a prison. Or, no, I wouldn't like to see inside a prison.
Why or why not?
Because I find that kind of thing interesting, or because it would make me feel very unhappy.
Root. What do we call that part of a tree that's in the land?
We call that part of a tree that's in the land its roots.
Problem. What's the biggest problem in your life?
The biggest problem in my life is money.
Memory. Have you got a good memory?
Yes, I've got a good memory. Or, no, I haven't got a good memory.
Another form of contraction of the present simple of the verb to be. I'm not, you aren't, he isn't, she isn't, it isn't, we aren't, you aren't, they aren't. I'm not, you're not, he's not, she's not, it's not, we're not, you're not, they're not. Instead of using the form I'm not, you aren't, he isn't, etc., we can use the form I'm not, you're not, he's not, etc. What form can we use instead of I'm not, you aren't, he isn't, etc.?
Instead of using I'm not, you aren't, he isn't, etc., we can use I'm not, you're not, he's not.